guys, last time we talked about nominalization, right? And we see that in nominalization, abstract concepts can become entities, right? Can become things that you can modify, that can even act on other things or other people, right? And in the case of fear, worry, and concern, for example, right? They are, in the transitivity patterns, they are constructed as agents or doers of some actions, right? So in that way, fear and worry and concern have more power, are more powerful than they really are, right? And fear is also, when you normalize something, right? The agent or the person responsible for that thing is usually gone, because originally it's a process, it's a verb, right? And when you normalize things, you don't need the agent, you don't need the party that's responsible for doing that process, right? So it's gone. So the meaning is more abstract, the meaning is not clear, right? And fear in the news headlines, for example, is represented as everyone's emotion, right? Because it's never indicated that it's the investor's fear or it's whose fears and so on, right? So we look at that. And today we'll move on from that and see something that's more similar or even more abstract than nominalization. And we'll look at metaphor today, okay? And I'll use these two examples as a way to introduce the concept of metaphor that we'll be studying today. So if you look at these two speeches by the former Prime Minister of the UK and Tony Blair, for example, in this World Faith Foundation 2010, he discussed these concepts, right, in order to resolve religious conflict that may have happened throughout the world. So he said, religious understanding is key to defeating hostilities threatening the world. What needs to be globalized is knowledge and understanding. It's knowledge that gives us foresight, wisdom, and helps people realize what they have in common, and so on. So this looks like it's a good speech, right? It's a powerful speech, right? And because you have like keywords like understanding, defeating hostilities, like bad feelings, understanding, knowledge, and foresight, and so on, it looks like a good speech, right? But in fact, it doesn't really say anything, right? Because you see understanding, you see defeating, you see understanding, you see knowledge, you see foresight. So these are nominalized phrases, right? And again, with nominalizations, you take out what needs to be understood, right? And also who does the understanding, and who knows what, and what should be known, what should be learned, and so on, right? So he doesn't really discuss like what religious conflicts are we talking about, right? And what things we should understand and how we should understand people and so on, right? Because religious conflict or any kind of conflict is very complicated, right? And if you just say, well, if we understand the conflict, everything will be solved. That's easy, right? So in this kind of speech, it's powerful, but in fact, it doesn't really say anything, because all he says is like understanding. What do we need to understand, and who should understand whom, and so on. Right? And in the next one, premature sexualization is like pollution. It's in the air that our children breathe all the time, every day, and so on. So this, again, we have sexualization from sexualize, right? And it's the air that our children breathe. So this is an example that we call metaphor, okay? Metaphorical use of language. So David Cameron compares like premature sexualization as pollution compared to pollution, right? So pollution is very negative, right? And then he also continues with, it's in the air that our children breathe. So it's like sexualization is like the air that we breathe, right? Like that's pollution. Now, but again, it's so abstract, because what is sexualization and who sexualizes whom, right? And what does it mean by premature? So when you normalize things, you can normalize phrases with adjective, right? What does it mean premature? I know that premature means before time, before the appropriate time, but what exactly is the appropriate time? By the time you're 15, 16, 17, 18, and so on. It's never discussed here, right? So normalization makes things more unclear, right? And we'll look at examples like this today, like how when people use metaphorical language to talk about things, to talk about one thing in terms of another thing. Okay? So we'll explore metaphor and the nature of metaphor. Okay, the adjective is metaphorical. Okay, and metaphor could be used as a count noun or uncount noun. So if you use metaphors, for example, you talk about many metaphors, and if you just talk about uncount, the uncount version of metaphor is like metaphor in general, and show how cultures may be similar or different in terms of metaphoric use. And then we'll look at some more examples to think about how metaphor can be used as a persuasive strategy when people write or when people say something. Okay? And the ultimate goal is how metaphor can shape and can kind of color our experiences and thought and perception. So the first thing that I want to do is to define what metaphor is. So metaphor in literary studies, okay? So this is not linguistic. So when you study literature, when people talk about metaphor, metaphor is a figure of speech, right? So things that people write or things that people say, when a phrase is applied to something else to suggest any kind of resemblance, right? Any kind of similarity, without the use of like or as, right? So that's literary studies, right? If you have like or as, that's a simile, for example, right? So this is as white as snow, for example. That's a simile. So that's in literature, right? And this can create a link between two things, right? Like you are the light of my light, for example. So this, you compare the other person as the light that gives you like happiness and so on, right? And other word is a stage. That's a metaphor, right? Is a stage, right? The word is like a stage and so on. So that's in literature. But in linguistics, however, in linguistics, metaphor is not thought of as kind of special use or special use of language or flowery language or anything like that. So it's something that's so basic to our human understanding of things, okay? And we use metaphor all the time, almost every minute when we talk or when we write about something, right? And it's a good way to understand one thing in terms of another thing, right? So that's metaphor. And metaphorical thinking underlies all of our statements around the world, okay? And we think and even we talk metaphorically all the time, okay? So just to use some examples that we see in our everyday life, even in science, when you're supposed to be objective, right? Science is known for being objective, right? Metaphors abound, meaning there are a lot of metaphors. So the greenhouse effect, for example, right? So actually, you know, the greenhouse effects, you know greenhouse, right? Greenhouse is kind of a construction, right? Usually made of glass, right? Where you keep like young plants in for controlled climate, right? Out of season, for example, right? So that you can grow strawberries and so on, right? So you control the climate in there. And even in the winter, for example, right? So so the sun shines into that glass construction, right? And then the heat cannot escape that construction because it's glass, right? So the heat is trapped inside so you can control the temperature, right? The climate and the environment, whereas the outside is cold, right? So you take that concept, you take that source concept, right? And you apply it to the kind of the environmental phenomenon that happens to the earth, right? Like it's like this is like a glass, kind of a amount of gas that's kind of around the earth, right? The planet. And when the sun shines here, the heat is trapped inside the gas there, right? And so the heat cannot escape out. So it's the same kind of situation. So we use that kind of concept to explain or even to call that kind of natural phenomenon that happens on the earth, right? And even sound waves, right? When we talk about phonetics, we talk about sound waves. So because when we analyze sounds, they come in this kind of characteristic, right? So and the sound waves look like the wave that we see in like more basic experience, right? So we use the same concept. Or when we talk about in science, when we talk about the anatomy of your heart, we usually use things that we see in everyday life. For example, valve, right? You know valve, right? So what do you use a valve for? A valve is used for controlling the flow of the liquid, right? So a valve can allow the liquid to flow in one direction, right? When you twist this, so the liquid will flow or the liquid will not flow, right? So it controls the flow of the liquid, right? Now in the heart, there are valves as well, right? And here we have tricuspid, bicuspid, and then pulmonary valve, and then mitral valve, and so on. and aortic valve and so on. You can see that and then the valves here work to control the flow of your blood, right? So that the blood flows from top to bottom, right? You see the valve here? It can go only in one direction. You cannot allow it to go in the other direction, right? There is a special disease that happens to the malfunction of the valve. It's called regurgitation, and you have to change the valve here. So the blood can flow from top to bottom, and in and out to the lungs and so on, right? And here, just to continue with the concept, we think about the heart as having 4 rooms, or in English, we use the word chambers. A chamber is a room, right? And actually, there's no room like where you can stay, where people can stay, but because there's like some small space in the heart, we compare that small space to room, right? So we call that chambers in English. And in Korean, I think you have the same thing, right? Pang and chil, for example, right? And we have 4 rooms, right? The top 2 and the bottom 2, right? The top 2 we call the atria. That's the plural. The singular is atrium. So that's singular. That's the plural. And the bottom room we call it ventricles. Right? So we have atria. That's the plural for the top room. And the atrium is the singular form, and ventricle for the bottom. Right? And so the blood will flow from top to bottom and in and out, right? And you can see that the heart is color-coded as well. For here, the blue color represents like deoxygenated blood, the blood without oxygen, and red, oxygenated blood, where after the blood is exchanged for some oxygen in the lungs and so on, right? So we use metaphors in everyday life, okay, to describe things. So what you need to, now you know what a metaphor is, right? A metaphor is the comparison between 2 things that are not naturally alike, but you see some kind of similarity, some similar aspects between the 2 things, and you use that similar aspect as a way to refer to the concept. Now, the next thing that you want to understand is when we compare 2 things, right? We say that there are 2 domains, okay? Two concept domains, 2 conceptual domains. We have source domain and we have the target domain for a metaphor. So when we have the source domain, that's the concept that we draw upon or draw from in order to create the metaphor. So that's the source. So when we talk about the greenhouse effect that occurs in the world environment, that's we use the source, the source from the greenhouse that we keep young plants in. So that's the source. And then the target is what you want to compare it to, right? The concept that we want to describe through the metaphor, like the greenhouse effect, the target is the global warming, for example, right? So the source is like what you borrow from, and then the source is what the target is what you want to understand. Okay, so we have 2 domains, and when we talk about love or relationship in our daily life, in English-speaking world at least, we usually think of a relationship or love as a journey. So journey is your source domain because we borrow the concept of taking a journey in order to explain what love is, right? For example, look how far we have come. You see the expression, that's a natural expression when we talk about a relationship. Look how far we have come. So it's like you use how far and come when you take a journey, right? We are at a crossroads. It has an S, but I don't know why it's in the singular. We are at a crossroads. It means the point where we need to make some decision. Like when you want to cross a street, for example, you have to make a decision as to when to cross the street safely and so on, right? So we use this when we take a journey as well. And when we use the concept in explaining, in talking about our love or relationship. We have to go our separate ways, right? So we do that. We say that when we take a journey, we can't turn back now to go back. I don't think our relationship is going anywhere, right? So it's like when you have a love relationship with someone, it's like you are going to some kind of destination, to some kind of goal together, right? We are stuck, so we cannot go anywhere. We have a problem. And this relationship is a dead-end street. So a dead-end street is a street that you cannot go further, right? So it's like this is the end of the relationship and so on, so we have to break up. So as you can see, from the beginning to the end, when we talk about our relationship, we usually think of a relationship as a journey. So we use all these expressions, and these are like natural expressions in English, okay? So maybe in Korean, you might talk about a love relationship with someone in the same way, right? Or social organizations are plants. So that's the kind of the metaphor, right? So the source is plant, right? And the target domain is the social organizations, whatever social organizations are, like department store, like university, whichever kind of social organizations. Like he works for the local branch of Shinhan. So branch or jom, right, in Korean. Branch is like you use it with trees, right, or with plants. So you use that word because you think of an organization as having many branches. And our company is growing. You use that word with plants as well. The school was rooted in a Christian tradition. Rooted, you use the root with plant, right? So this is like having long history. Korea is a flourishing market, like blossoming. His business blossomed when the inflation hit and so on, right? So you use this term when you describe plants. Employees reaped enormous benefits from cheap foreign labor. So reap is to harvest, right? To get the reward from something, right? So you use all these terms to describe plants. So when you think of social organizations, whether it's your company, whether it's a bank, whether it's a university, you use plant-related terms. So that's why we have this kind of metaphor in our head all the time, even though we don't really say that, oh, now I'm gonna talk about social organizations in the same way as I talk about plants, right? But we just use these terms like without even paying attention, okay? Or argument is war or fighting. So when we talk about, or when we think about argument, at least in the English-speaking world, we think of someone who is very argumentative as someone who is having war with us, right? He attacked every weak point in my argument. Attack is the term that you use when you fight, when you fight with somebody and when you have war with somebody, right? He shut down all my arguments to shoot something down. His remark was right on target. I never won when I argue with him. You disagree, shoot your arguments. You need to defend your points and so on. So these are natural ways of referring to how you talk about argumentation and how people argue with you, right? So it means that, subconsciously, you must be thinking, or people who use this kind of wording, subconsciously, you must be thinking of having argument like having a war or having a fight with someone, right? And this is true for English-speaking people, most of them, right? And we cannot even imagine other ways of talking about argument, having argument, without using these words. So it must be that this is deeply rooted, again, I used the metaphor, deeply rooted in English-speaking mind, right? And now, so now you know what metaphor is, and now you know that there are two domains for metaphor. We have the source domain, the thing that, the concept that you draw from, and then we have the target domain, the concept that you want to explain, right? You want to understand. Now, how to identify metaphors. When you want to identify metaphors, first thing you do is you read the entire text in order to get a general understanding of what it's about. And then the next thing is you examine the kind of lexical choices, words that people use in the text. And you want to find, think about the more basic functions of those words. So for example, when you see all these underlined words, attack, shut down, right on target, one, shoot, and defend, these words have more basic functions when they're used with war or fighting, right? So we say that that's the more basic function of these words, right? And that's when you get the source domain of the metaphor, okay? And once you understand the overall meaning, you can get the target domain, which is the argument, right? Because they are talking about making or having argument here, right? So that's how you can identify metaphors, okay? And metaphor is important because it's not like a special technique of describing things or anything. It's an everyday, right, life experience, and we have more or less the same metaphorical way of thinking, right, if we come from the same culture. And metaphor is important because sometimes we cannot even understand one concept without using a metaphor. Like if we don't refer to the heart as having 4 chambers, how should we refer to the space inside the heart? There's no other way for us to call that, right? Or there's no other way of calling global warming if we don't use the term greenhouse effects and so on, right? So metaphor is so important. And the reason why I bring metaphor to this class is that when you have non-congruent, remember incongruent transitivity patterns, sometimes you see a lot of metaphors there. Okay? So for the rest of today, we'll practice how to recognize metaphor in everyday life experiences. So I'll pass out this handout to you, and we'll help each other recognize metaphor in everyday experience. So when you want to recognize metaphor, first you have to understand the whole text, right? Or understand the whole sentence as to what it talks about, what it wants to talk about, and then look at some special, some specific expressions that might be based on some more basic functions of things. Okay, everyone has a handout, right? If you look at the first one, so I have this as the kind of the metaphor for you to help you. So theories are. So in all these examples, we are talking about theories, whatever is scientific theories, metaphorical theory, whatever, right? So you look at all the examples here, and they are talking about theories. So we have the target domain being theories, okay? So that's the concept that they want to understand, okay? And are what? Now we look at all the examples here and see this, some specific linguistic expressions that might show some more basic uses of those terms. Is that the foundation for your theory? So they're talking about the theory, right? So theory is the target domain that they want to understand. Now, is that the foundation for your theory? Foundation, you can underline foundation, okay? So you can underline foundation. When do we use the word foundation, okay? What is the more basic use of the word foundation? If you cannot think of the answer, now let's look at the other one. The theory needs more support. So support here, right? So you can underline it. When do we use the word support, right? What is a more basic use of the word support? When. If you cannot think of that, let's look at one more. We need to construct a strong argument for that. So you can underline construct and strong, right? So when do we use the word construct, and when do we use the word strong? In a more like basic way of representation. We need to buttress the theory with solid argument. So you can underline buttress and then solid, right? Buttress is like a kind of structural support. Buttress is like this structural support that you could you use to provide support for like some part of a building, maybe like this. So this is what we call the buttress. Okay, so you support this wall, right, from tumbling down, right? So this is called buttress, and it comes in so many varieties and so many sizes. So that's what we call the buttress as a noun. Okay, like this is called the buttress. So you provide support to that part of the construction. Okay? So buttress, to buttress as a verb means to support. Okay? So the theory will stand or fall on the strength of that argument. So we have stand or fall, and then strength, right? So three linguistic expressions that might tell you about what metaphor is being used here. And then last one, so far we have put together only the frame of the theory. So frame. So frame, when do we use the word frame, right? So all in all, when do we use all these expressions? Foundation, support, construct, buttress, solid, stand or fall, and then the frame. So when do we use these terms? We use these terms with construction, right? With building houses or to construct buildings, right? So when we think about theories, whether it's scientific theories or anything like that, we think of theories like think of buildings or constructions, right? So theories are constructions. Theories are houses, theories are buildings, and so on. Okay? So you can say theories are constructions, houses, buildings, whatever. Okay? So that's usually how we think about theories, right? Because you have to have some like solid kind of line of argument for it, and you have to support your theories with evidence and with examples, right? And so on. In number 2, we'll go to like maybe the first 5, and then you can do the rest for today. Ideas are what? So ideas here, that's the target domain. And what source domain is that? All this paper has in it are raw facts, half-baked ideas, and warmed over theories, right? So you might get that kind of comment from your writing professor, for example, right? Raw, the word raw, right? Very prominent, very outstanding. It stands out, right? Half-baked, right? When do we use the word half-baked or raw? And warmed over theory, when do we use that? And so on, okay? Half-baked is not done, right? It's not cooked, right? So half-baked is not like, meaning not developed, not well developed, right? And warm over, when you warm something over and over again, it's not fresh anymore, right? It's old, right? Because when you warm something, put in the microwave oven, for example, so many times that's not fresh anymore, right? So when do we use these terms? There are too many facts here for me to digest them all. When do we use the word digest, right? I just can't swallow the claim, to swallow, to take something in through your throat. Let me stew over that for a while. Stew over is to think about it. But when do we use the word stew, right? When we make stew, for example, right? Stew is like when you boil something for a long time, let it simmer for a long time. That's food for thought. So we refer to ideas as food for thought, for example, right? She devoured the book. Devour means to eat greedily, to devour, to eat, right? Let's let that idea simmer for a while. Simmer is like to put it on kind of low heat for a long time. So when do we use these terms? When we use them in like more basic functions. Raw, half-baked, warmed over, digest, swallow, stew, food, devour, and simmer. These are cooking terms, right? These are cooking terms, and they are related to food. So we can say that ideas are like food that we eat. Ideas are food, right? So we think of ideas as food, as the same way that we think of food, okay? In number 3, there are only 2 examples, I think. In number 3, countries, that's the target domain that we want to explain, right? Or that we usually think of. And then are what? When we refer to countries, we have expressions in English like neighboring countries, right? Like North Korea is the neighboring country of South Korea, for example, neighboring, right? Friendly nation, whether it's a friendly nation or unfriendly nation, right? And then the founding fathers of Korea, for example, we have father of Korea, right? So, Sejong maybe, right? So when do we use the terms neighbor, friendly, or father? They are family, right? They are family-related terms. So we think of countries as like family members, for example, right? Or households even, or a house, right? Countries are like houses, right? Or families. We can have, so the country next to us is our neighbor, just like the house next to us is our neighbor, and so on, okay? Next one, we'll do number 4. So I didn't specify any of the 2 domains, right? For you now, you have to figure out what are the domains and what are the 2 domains. So Germany built a strong economy, okay? So they are talking about economy now, right? So Germany built a strong economy, okay? The second one, the growth of the economy. So still, the topic is about economy. So maybe that's one of the 2 domains, okay? And 4.3, Korea's economy is galloping ahead, right? Korea's economy is galloping ahead. So maybe for all these examples, the target domain is economy, right? So economy. In the first one, Germany built a strong economy. Built. So it has to be like a building, right? So in the first one, economy is like a building, right? So you can build or destroy the economy, okay? Ruin the economy, right? So economy is a building, for example. In 4.2, the growth of the economy. Maybe for that one, economy is like a plant. It can grow, it can blossom, right? The economy can blossom, for example. In the third one, Korea's economy is galloping ahead. You know, the verb to gallop, right, is used with a horse, right? So galloping ahead is like moving ahead, right? So this is part of a journey, right? So economy is like a journey for 4.3, okay? Taking a journey. Number 5, I'll do this as the last one, and then we'll do the rest together in groups. So they're talking about birth and death, okay? The baby will arrive soon, right? And then, so that's the birth, right? Experience. Grandpa is gone, meaning dead, right? He's dead. His father passed away, to die, right? He went west, or he went to a better place. To go west means to die. To go to a better place also means to die. Okay? He departed this life on the 17th of January. Departed, right? So, birth is what? Like arrival, right? Birth is coming. Birth is arrival. Whereas death is maybe the opposite, right? Departure, right? Maybe in Korean, I think you have the same thing, right? 떠나다, right? 세상은 떠나다, for example, right? Or 들러가시다, right? Like go back, I don't know where, but so, right? It's kind of same thing, right? Now we'll do 6 to 8, maybe in 15 minutes or so, okay? But before that, I want to show some more examples of metaphors in Korean. I read this recent paper about the linguistic of what to eat or what not to eat. So how people in different cultures talk about eating or drinking. So there's a paper about Korean by this professor, and she talks about the metaphor of eating and drinking in your language, right? Or this one, to eat the criticism, right? To eat the criticism. So it's like receive criticism and so on, right? Caught a cold because he took in too much cold air. Like here, where's the, this is the word to drink, not to eat, right? So 마셔서, right? And so on. And then this is to drink again, to drink a lot of gas in, right? Breathing in. So you don't use the word 먹다 for this one, right? And then it's interesting to see these 2 examples. Like when you refer to people, relationship with people, you say that you have been eating together for 10 years, something like that, it's like you are friend, you have been friends for 10 years and so on, right? So you don't usually think of really eating the meal pub, right, together, but meaning extended to friendship. And then, have one more bowl of rice, ate one more bowl of rice than me, like older than someone, right? So this is another metaphor. So it seems that from reading this paper, it seems that in Korea or in Korean culture, eating and drinking are so common or so important activities that are in people's life, right? And you use eating and drinking to refer to all sorts of activity, including having sex or whatever, right? Or even relationship with people, right? So this is a kind of the subconscious thing that we have, and this subconscious thing is metaphorical, okay? So in the same way, we could look at how English-speaking culture, how the English-speaking culture uses different expressions to describe different maybe relationships or different activities in our life, okay? So we'll do number 6 to number 8 on the back. There are both Korean and English examples. For those of you who don't know Korean, I have the translation for you, okay? So I'll give you about 15 minutes or so to do this, and then we'll talk about this as a class afterwards. I will circulate around to help you. So let's look at number 6, which is a kind of extract from this song that I like, All For You, right? So what do you think is the metaphor here? Love, right? 내 작은 맘속 끝, right? So it's like in my small heart, right? So in my small heart, I want to fill it with your scent, right? So to fill the heart with scent. So it's like a heart is a place that you can feel something in, right? And then if you look at the next line, right? 그 속에, right? 영원히 갇혀 버린대도, right? So although I'm forever completely trapped inside, right? So 버리다 is like completely. So trapped inside, so you can trap someone inside your heart, really. So if this is how you think about the heart or how you think about love, so here your love is like, or your heart is like a container, right? Or even a room that you can trap people in, right? So that person just cannot escape from that, right? So your heart is like a container or is like a room that you can keep that person in, right? And fill that room with like scent or whatever, right? Good experience and so on, right? So I like the song. Okay. Number 8, related to number 7. Okay. He has quite a sexual appetite. So appetite we use with food, right? Hunger. So in this case again, lust or sexual desire is like food. Okay. It's like hunger, to be more specific. Sexual desire is like hunger. Okay. Maybe that's the same for your culture as well, right? The thought of Gina in that sexy black shirt made him even hungrier, right? Again, same thing. So lust is hunger, right? He's quite a piece of meat, right? So again, food-related term, right? So object of sexual desire is meat. Object of sexual desire is meat. Right? Number 8.4, you look juicy. Juicy, you can use juicy to describe like a fruit that has a lot of juice, right? But juicy nowadays can also mean like good part. Like the juicy part of the movie, for example, is the part that has some substance in it, okay? The part that's important. So juicy, you can use it to describe meat or your steak as well. The steak is very juicy, meaning that it's not dry, it's not overdone, it's not too well done, right? So in this case, again, object of sexual desires is meat, right? Number, next one, 8.5. I've got the hots for her. So the hots here is like sexual desire, right? So sexual desire is fire, right? Similarly, in number 8.6, he was burning with desire. So sexual desire is fire, again, because you use the word burning, right? A more basic function of that. But so the opposite of sexual desire, which is fire, then the lack of sexual desire has to be like ice, right? So you can see this in 8.7. She's frigid. Frigid means chilly or very cold. So frigid, like Frigidaire, right? Refrigerator. Fridge means cold. So frigid means, like, in this case, lack of sexual desire. It's like ice, okay? Lack of fire. So lack of sexual desire is ice. Don't be cold to me, baby, like that. So lack of sexual desire is lack of fire or is ice, okay? So as you can see, in the English-speaking world, English-speaking culture, we refer to sex as fire, something that's burning, right? Something that's hot, maybe because, I don't know why, but maybe because it's fun. But also we use the honeypot as the, we refer to sex or sexual activity as food as well, right? So two main sources, food or fire, okay? And food-related terms like hungry and stuff, okay? Number nine, we are talking about anger here. So different expressions of anger in English. So he was battling his anger. So battle is like to fight or to go to war, right? So in this case, anger is like your enemy, right? Your enemy. Anger is your enemy in a fight, okay? And he was growling with rage. So the verb to growl here, it's used with animal in more basic terms, right? So anger in this case is like a dangerous or a wild animal, okay? So it's like a person who is really angry is compared to a wild or a very dangerous animal here, okay? A fierce animal and so on, okay? 9.3, she was brimming with rage. So brim, you use the verb to brim with liquid, right? That will spill out from the container, from the pot, for example, right? So in this case, anger is like the heat of fluid in a container, okay? So hot fluid in a container. So like it can come out of your head all the time, right? So anger is something that's hot, right? Maybe not as hot as, sex, as in number 7 and 8, but different types, okay? Number 9.4, use insincere apology. So it's not sincere. Insincere apology just added fuel to the fire. Again, anger is like fire or hot thing, right? Similarly, 9.5, I had reached the boiling point. So this is like the last straw that he has, like the last point that he can bear. So boiling point, same as 9.3 or 9.4, right? So anger is fire, okay? Or heat of fluid in a container, okay? Hot fluid. Number 9.6, you're beginning to get to me. This one is different. To get to someone is like, here is my territory, here's my line, okay? And you cross the line to get to me. So it's like anger is like intrusion, right? To intrude, right? Intrusion. Intrude, the verb. Intrusion, the noun. Or you can say trespassing. To overstep. Or to intrude, or to invasion, and so on. Okay. Trespassing. So to go into someone's territory, to go into someone's area, okay? To overstep your boundary, so to go over the limit, okay? Number 9.7, he's a pain in the neck or a pain in the ass. So he's annoying, in other words, okay? So anger is like physical annoyance, okay? So it's like a pain in the neck that you cannot just relieve, you cannot eliminate, like it's there all the time, pain in your back. It's like chronic, right? So it persists through like maybe a long period of time. So you cannot get him out. him or her out. So it's like anger is physical annoyance. We have time for the last one. So these examples are from Korean. And for those of you who don't know Korean, I have the English version for number 8. So he was reared with abundant love and so on, right? 틈밥 받고 자랐어, right? So with a lot of love, right? So that's one example. So we're talking about love here, right? Or 정, which is hard to translate, right? 정. So 정 or love is blah, blah, blah. So we look at one example. He was reared with abundant love, right? So 받고, to receive, right? In number 2, because he lived a lonely life, separated from his mother, he was starved, right? So starved, 줄이고, right? And thirsty for affection, right? So 몰라 했어요, and so on, right? 몰라 했어요. So you have these expressions underlined, right? And then the next one, she's crooked in her personality because he didn't get enough love from her stepmother while she was raised, and so on, right? 피털러셨어, right? So that's crooked, right? So now, all of these terms are terms that have to do with maybe food or eating, right? So in this case, we can say that love is like nutrients, nutrients, so like beneficial things that you eat. Love is like nutrients. So beneficial things that you eat. But without nutrients, you cannot be like healthy, a healthy person, right? You can be like, you can develop some kind of disorder without nutrients. You will not die, but you will not be like a healthy person or a wholesome person, and so on. Okay? So today we look at different examples of metaphors and from different domains, and these are domains that you will see or you'll read in your everyday life. And next time we'll come back and talk about metaphors. Okay?